I was born in Galesburg, Illinois, a little town nobody's ever really heard of, kind of halfway between St. Louis and Chicago.
I'm Ken. I was born in Ventura, California, which is on the coast, just north of Los Angeles. I had a series of jobs that I really didn't like, and I was in these jobs that just didn't mean anything to me. And I remember I had this time when I went to the Lord, and I said, God, there's got to be more than this. The Lord told me, I'm glad you think that, because I have a pulpit ready for you. And then I got a call from Burke, and they really wanted me to be an interim pastor. Their pastor had left. I didn't have the right qualifications. I didn't have any experience. And they said, would you just preach for us while we find the full-time senior pastor? And I thought, oh, this is fantastic. God's giving me an opportunity to practice. After about 3 months of that, the church just said, hey, this is working out. Why don't you stick around?
So my first senior pastor job was here. I started when I was 26 years old. And they... Oh, golly. No.
Fully prepared.
No, not even close. In fact, when they called me, it was in January or February of 2003, and the guy who called me was the head of the search committee here, and I wasn't home, so he left a message on my answering machine. He identified who he was, he said the church he was calling from and what they were calling about, and at Parkgate Community Church in Pasadena, Texas, senior pastor, and I literally turned to my wife and said, there's been a mistake here. I was convinced that either A, they got my name mixed up with somebody else, or B, they were told something about me that was fabulously not true. And that when I called him back, literally I was expecting to say, you know, tell him who I was or what I was, and he was going to say, oh, thank you, I'm sorry, we got this mixed up, no problem, sorry to bother you, and that would be that. But they did know who I was, and they did at least have some vague idea of what they were getting into, so it wasn't a mistake. But that started quite a wild journey.
You know, as the elders and I talked about how we move forward and what's the best thing for the kingdom and what's the best thing for Burke, and you know, Jim's been a good friend of mine. We've had lunch every week together nearly, for 5 years. I mean, my goodness, the restaurant knows us so good, they give us Christmas presents. And so we just chatted one day, and we were talking about how the future would go, and Jim just said, I had this crazy idea. What if we put our churches together? And I said, that is a crazy idea, but I took it to my elders, and they thought, that sounds interesting. And they began talking to some people over here, and the next thing you know, you could see God moving like crazy. Roadblocks are getting taken out of the way. Of course, when you think about these things, you think of all the reasons why this can't work. And as we began to talk through those things, they just began to get knocked down. It was very evident God was doing something here.
Here we are on the very first day of worshiping together as one congregation. And now here's what the challenge really is for us, and I don't think there's any way to get around it. Will our rhetoric of saying that we want to be a church that really reaches out to people far from God and a church that really helps people to grow up to maturity in Him, will our rhetoric match with our action? I really want to see a church that thrives on reaching people who other places would just, otherwise ignore or write off as a lost cause. I want to see our church thrive at seeing people take real sacrificial risks to serve God and to give in His name, whether that be money, whether that be time, whether that be talents. I want to see a church that regularly sees people receive calls and move into ministry places beyond our walls. I think we have just a wonderful story to tell, and I think God's going to give us an even bigger story, but the question really becomes, will we match our rhetoric with action? And I'm excited now to see the action come into play.
I am Ken Boggs.
My name is Jim Feartag.
And I am Parkgate.